Hey there, everyone. It's been a while. Hope you're all doing safe and well in this interesting time. I've had several inquiries about when I was going to make some more videos, so I've got a short list of topics which I hope to crank out in the next few days. In this episode, I'm going to address some of the concerns and peculiarities of working with light colored tartans, either with a white or a slightly off-white background. My Often I get an inquiry. Sometimes these are called a dress tartan. I'm not going to get too wound up in the naming of such. I'm just not going to go there. But my concern when a customer will express a preference for one of these is how liable it is to get stained. I mean, one pop in the face, one spilled glass of red wine, and you're going to have to work very, very quickly to prevent a permanent stain. So I will, the customer isn't always right, but it is the customer's kilt and not mine. So when the customer won't be budged on a light background like this, we just have to do our best. So in this case, I reviewed with the customer exactly how he wanted it to be pleated, and I gave the usual options of pleating to the set versus the stripe. And I showed him the various options for pleating to the stripe, and basically to the red line, to the yellow line, to the white line on red, to the white line on black. And I got him to choose. I didn't get him to choose. In discussion, we decided that the two best options were pleating it to the white line on the black or the white line on the red, so that across the back of the pleat, so back of the kilt and the pleats, we would have as little of the white field visible as possible. And strictly from a practical point of view, it means that should he ever forget and sit on a chair that he hasn't given a wipe with a cloth, if something stains or something like that, it's going to be a little less noticeable on the red or on the black. The other nice feature about it, in the shall we say the artistic aspect of it, is when we are pleating to one particular stripe, when he walks, he's going to get these flash of white, which I've remarked upon elsewhere. So it's going to be quite striking. Another concern about working with this light colored cloth is the use of chalk. We have clay chalk and we have wax chalk. The clay is a powder, or at least you can get rid of it just by beating it so that the granules, the powder disperses. The wax we can get rid of by touching it with an iron, and that usually, and I stress, usually works. You're learning from my mistakes. I won't call it mistakes. It was a valuable lesson. One time I was working with a kilt with tartan with this very light color. I apply the chalk. Later on, I find the iron won't take the chalk out for whatever reason. Didn't happen. I was panic stricken. Can't remember now what I did, but the lesson that I've learned from that is I will test, even though this is from the same mill, I will test on a lighter cloth. I'll make a chalk mark somewhere and then press it with the iron to make sure. But even then, maybe that's not going to happen all the time. So when I've laid out this apron, you may be able to see if you look closely. I've done a chalk mark, but I haven't done a chalk mark on the white. I did it. Fortunately, the chalk marks landed on the black, so there's a faint chalk mark there. But I've emphasized it with a baste of white thread. It's not terrifically visible. I have to look for it. I've left the tails long for that reason. But that means that I can refer to these marks without having to have a great heavy mark, which to my chagrin I will find later that I can't remove from the cloth. It's a little less of a danger when I'm making a chalk mark at the edge of where a seam is going to be, because I can, with planning and forethought, I can make that chalk mark so that when the time comes to sew the seam, I can roll the chalk mark out of sight. but still, that's a concern. Another thing that I've noticed with this custom woven cloth is towards the end, one end of the piece. I mean, the middle of it, the weave is lovely and straight, but at the end, I notice, and this was my apprentice pointed this out to me, that we have some irregularities where the cloth is laying flat, but the line's a bit crooked, and I have to believe that is the early meter or so of weaving that the machine hasn't quite sorted out its tensions. Now, when you get this, it's once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? But the way that I've found to deal with this, and I'm going to do this before I start working on the kilt or sewing the kilt, is I'm going to put this on my pressing table, and I'm going to moisten, I'm going to wet the areas that need to be corrected, and by stretching them, see that curve there, I'm pulling the curve out of it and then pressing it, and it takes a bit of effort and it's certainly time consuming, but that corrects these wiggles that we can see. When the mill reopens, I'm going to take them to task, I think, on this, because I didn't used to see this in this. Still beautiful cloth, but I didn't used to see this, and I think perhaps that they need to weave the cloth until the lines are perfectly sorted out, and then when cutting the cloth to send it to the client, they say, okay, the imperfections stop here, and they discard that piece. I think that's what has to happen, but we shall see. So great. So there we have our points about the chalking, about how laying up the pleats to minimize the risk of damage. And again, when we have a stain or other sort of mark on the kilt, we do our best to clean it. But if it doesn't get out, there's chances it won't get out. About the only thing we can do is come up with a really good damn story about why that particular stain was there. You know, there I was surrounded by my enemies. Yeah, whatever. So there we go. Future episode, I'm going to talk about some details of sewing the fell seam. I was asked about that, about the creep, as when you're sewing a seam, that the tartan set gets offset on the seam and it stands out. I'll show how to correct that. And there's probably one or two other topics kicking around my head right now, which I'll come out with and then post. So thank you very much and stay safe.